Story 1. No palm wonderful, pistachios or almonds. The Resnicks are largely responsible for the privatization of water rights in California. They also own Fiji Water, which has privatized water in Fiji, causing residents to pay more for water. Story 2. I will always spend at least 10 minutes trying to find an alternative to Amazon. Story 3. I was an employee at Starbucks. My district was union busted while I worked there, long before people began boycotting the company in late 2023. Since then, I have not had a reason to go there. Story 4. I worked at Walmart, and my coworker had a seizure. The shift lead refused to call an ambulance because she did not want him to sue Walmart. So she dragged him into a storage room and left him there. I clocked out early and called his boyfriend for him. If the anti-union brainwashing videos had not soured my attitude toward the company, the way they treated that man did. Story 5. Hobby Lobby. Apart from religious disagreements, the company refuses to support its employees and steals religious artifacts. Story 6. I quit my job at Wells Fargo because the bank opened fraudulent accounts without customers' consent. I also persuaded about 5 people not to accept jobs there. Fuck Wells Fargo. Story 7. Nestle, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and any company that produces food but is listed on the stock market. I always go as local as I can. Story 8. Robinhood. As soon as they put their hedge funds ahead of retail investors, I moved all my investments to a new brokerage account. Story 9. Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A. There are others I do not care for, but these two are the only ones that regularly come up for me. Both have locations near me and sell things I like. Story 10. Amazon. Fast fashion and fast food. I try to avoid Nestle and Coca-Cola where I can. Apple. Tesla. Story 11. I try my hardest to avoid Nestle. They own many brands, so it is sometimes difficult. I will never buy Nestle bottled water. They are despicable. Story 12. Let us not forget Goya. I will be damned if any of my bean money goes toward the most half-hearted fascist regime I have ever seen. Story 13. I canceled my car purchase from Tesla. I have closed my far-right social media accounts. Story 14. I try to avoid creating waste as much as possible. I buy almost everything secondhand. If not refurbished, I buy from smaller brands that share information about sourcing. I do not eat much processed food or fast food, and I do not eat meat. I mostly shop at the farmer's market or buy vegetables and fruit from the supermarket. I try to buy good quality items so they will last. I do not have subscription services. Occasionally I have to, but I try not to spend money on creating more waste. If I am in a bind, I will go wherever is available. On road trips, Walmart is sometimes the only option. Story 15. I do not fly United Airlines because of the number of dogs they kill every year. Their survival rates are much lower than those of other airlines. Story 16. Samsung. There is a documentary on YouTube about how unsafe work practices led to the deaths of several employees, which the company denied for 20 years and eventually admitted. Shine. It is self-explanatory. Nothing produced that cheaply and so quickly is made without exploitation. My list is long, but these two will do for now. Story 17. I do not use Amazon. I have used them only once in the last 10 years. I will not go to Starbucks anymore because I find their union busting disgusting. Story 18. I will not patronize Walmart because of the overall poor quality of their merchandise and food compared with Target, how they treat their employees, and how predatory they are towards small businesses in mid-sized regions. I avoid Nestle and Monsanto because I consider them both morally objectionable, though that is difficult, especially with Roundup Ready wheat being essentially the only wheat farmed in the United States. Story 19. Meta. In my view, social media are responsible for chaos in societies, including riots and the rise of unhinged propaganda. It is blood money. I don't want anything to do with it. Story 20. Sephora is dead to me after they contributed to this fascist regime and ended their diversity programs. Story 21. I have been trying to buy as little as possible from large corporations. Besides the political and other harm they cause, you are sending your hard-earned dollars outside your community. Supporting local businesses is always better when you can afford it. There are a few exceptions, but BlackRock and other private equity groups are major shareholders in 99.99% of the well-known brands you are familiar with. We should all stop buying into their game. Story 22. I have never eaten Chick-fil-A because of their views against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and other people. I do not care how good the chicken sandwich may be. Story 23. The MyPillow guy literally tried to overthrow democracy. Story 24. I start from the other direction. Story 25. All companies have something to be upset about. It is not worth the effort. Story 26. I have never used Amazon. I have always been an eBay customer. Now Taco Bell and McDonald's are dead to me. They raised the price of the Cravings box from $6.49 to $11.49 overnight. And McDonald's removed the McDouble from the buy one, get one for $1 offer. That offer had been available for at least 5 years. Right before the coronavirus pandemic, they were running specials of 2 for $3. Story 27. I do not support Red No. 40 or any Gatorade product that contains it. Story 28. Nike is not wholly what you might expect. If you listen to Mary Kane or read books by Lauren Fleshman or Kara Goucher, all professional runners, you will see how terribly Nike treats its female athletes. Story 29. I really want to, but there was an image recently that showed a few corporations, Nestle for example, and then showed the spider web of companies they own, then their subsidiaries and so on. It is almost borderline impossible at this stage to do a real boycott of many things. Even if you buy milk from a local cooperative, how do you know the agricultural products and machines they use aren't produced by a company? Story 30. The one I have not seen mentioned yet is Baker Seed. Territorial seed is an alternative I like. I would also like to mention that in many cases being able to choose the companies you do business with is a privilege. Story 31. Nestle. Obvious. Tesla. Obvious. Tally's. A seafood company in my country that is hostile to workers and massively anti-union. Any business I know to be owned by the exclusive brethren, because they are even worse than the Tallies and use that money to hide sexual abuse and domestic violence and to try to influence elections covertly. Cadbury, because the private equity firm that bought them, Mondelez, is exploitative. Any real estate firm that also has a property management division that mistreats tenants. They are never going to get my money. Story 32. I found out today that Apple objects to removing a part from another iPhone to repair your current phone. Hands off, Apple. Let people repair their phones. Story 33. I have stopped buying McDonald's ever since they were comfortable with one of their outlets being used as a campaign platform for the former guy. Story 34. I heard a rumor that Starbucks was not donating to veterans, but I believe it was false and I refuse to double-check. The worst case is that I save money by buying an energy drink instead of a large, fancy coffee. Story 35. Fast fashion clothing retailers such as Zara and Pennies, also known as Primark, offer poor quality and cause significant harm to the environment and to their workers. Story 36. I shop at local mom-and-pop shops. I cannot see any corporation being ethical. My tax dollars stay local. Story 37. If I remember a commercial that I was forced to watch, I'm not buying the product. Story 38. I avoid Tesla, Hobby Lobby, Chick-fil-A, and Facebook. I told Facebook they were a plague on the nation when I canceled. I also avoid X, formerly known as Twitter, and anything written by J.K. Rowling. I used to read her mysteries. I avoid the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'm sure there is more. I've picked my poison. I still use Amazon. Story 39. Cadbury. I am a New Zealander and have not bought their products since the company closed its New Zealand factory. Story 40. Jimmy John's chief executive officer participates in killing animals that are raised to be comfortable around humans. Story 41. Chick-fil-A, Hobby Lobby, and the Salvation Army have supported lobbying and public stances opposed to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people over the years. Story 42. I do not buy products that are not cruelty-free. If I am not sure, I check online to confirm. I am replacing all my cosmetics, household cleaners, and supplies with cruelty-free products. Story 43. I cannot access external websites. Please paste the text here. Do you want every acronym replaced by its full expansion, e.g., ASAP, as soon as possible? If an acronym is ambiguous, should I expand to the most common meaning or ask you before changing it? I will then correct spelling and punctuation, remove meaningless repetition, remove special characters and links, output only the cleaned content optimized for Azure text-to-speech. Story 44. I do not buy anything or try not to as much as possible from the company I work for or any of the other companies they own. I like the money to be a one-way trip to my wallet. Story 45. British Petroleum, the oil spill. Nestle, the infant formula. Volkswagen, deceptive vehicle emissions control software. Story 46. Nestle, if I see it in time. These companies are everywhere. Tesla, obviously, but that also has a lot to do with their quality even before Musk went full Goebbels. Starbucks. Story 47. My mom won't buy Bayerische Motoren Werke, BMW, or Volkswagen because of Nazi ties and is wary of other German brands. My wife's family won't buy anything at Walmart because of the way they treat workers. I don't really have any ethical hang-ups, but I have referred to my friend's Tesla as a swastika car and probably would not buy one for myself in the future. Story 48. No, all of them do it. I only boycott those that have affected me personally. Story 49. I stopped using Klarna entirely because it laid off employees in favor of artificial intelligence. Toys R Us, Coca-Cola, and Starburst are on my list to avoid because of lifeless commercials generated by artificial intelligence. Story 50. These are mostly Australian examples. I moved away from Westpac Bank because they are pretty evil even by the standards of Australia's Big Four banks. Harvey Norman is run by right-wing prick Jerry Harvey. He has extolled the virtues of authoritarianism. Harvey Norman also claims that the labor shortage needs to be the government's top priority to fix, while he faces legal challenges over the toxicity of his work environments. Storage group Kennard Self-Storage is owned by Sam Kennard, who is the key donor behind the political lobby group Advance Australia, which is essentially pushing Make America Great Again style politics in Australia. I would also boycott Gina Reinhart for her bankrolling of the Institute for Public Affairs, the most destructive lobby group in the country and basically our version of the Heritage Foundation, but I do not buy coal so I have no means to do so. Story 51. Very personal but about Cracker Barrel. My best friend lost both her parents when she was in high school and worked at Cracker Barrel. She asked for Mother's Day off, so she would not have to watch families celebrate their living mothers as a 17-year-old and was told, so it's not like you will be doing anything else that day. It was definitely not a corporate issue, but I never ate there again. Story 52. Walmart. I do not support their union-busting activities. Their business model is to greedily bully local governments and suppliers for a better deal. They make billions of dollars, drive local businesses to shut down, and then pay low wages with terrible benefits. Henry Ford had the idea to pay his workers enough so they could afford the products they made, helping create the American middle class. Walmart, on the other hand, pays so poorly that its workers have to receive benefits from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program just to afford shopping at the cheapest stores. Story 53. Nestle, Walmart, Amazon, Home Depot, Shine, AliExpress, Apple, Tesla, Hobby Lobby, and Chick-fil-A. Lowe's and Target just hit my list with their diversity, equity, and inclusion rollbacks. Story 54. Walmart's great value brand literally destroys small businesses. Story 55. For the last few months, I have been boycotting Coca-Cola. I am a semi-professional cartoonist and do commission work on the side. Seeing that their holiday ad last year was made with artificial intelligence, I have no interest in supporting a company that took a job away from human artists. As an artist, I am not well known, and my boycott is not likely to make any difference, but I feel I must draw a line in the sand somewhere. Story 56. I try to avoid Oreos when I can. I will never forgive what they did to Hydrox. Story 57. If I have a choice, I'll boycott them. Sometimes there's no alternative or it is a Rob Peter to pay Paul scenario, so it is whatever. Story 58. The owner of the Bojangles locations in Roanoke, Virginia, bought a property next to a wildlife rehabilitation center and sued them to try to get them to stop operating. He is scum, so no Bojangles for me. Story 59. Dick's Sporting Goods is a sporting goods store that opposes shooting sports. Fuck them. Story 60. McDonald's. Poor products and employment practices, bad for your health, and the worst people eat there. Story 61. No. I tried it and it was miserable. Once you look into things, you would barely be able to breathe. People are so pretentious about their beliefs that they become hypocrites. For example, many people say one company is bad, but then buy from another company that is also bad. It is ironic that people use Amazon to find alternatives when Amazon is also a bad company. Story 62. Nestle, Amazon, Chick-fil-A. The big three. I also do not support Michelin tires, but their mascot is very awkward. Story 63. Does Harvey Norman have anything to do with Rupert Murdoch, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, or Nestle? Story 64. Meta and X, formerly Twitter, were notable for obvious reasons. McDonald's also attracted attention for pulling that stunt last year. Story 65. I do not buy from or shop at any organization that has donated to the Heritage Foundation. Story 66. Dr. Pepper's chief executive officer is a fucking Nazi, so I'm not totally heartbroken. Story 67. Anything Murdoch, including Fox, Sky, Binge, and newspapers. I would rather take my own eye out with a spoon than put money in his pocket. Also Tesla and Starlink. I have a general rule. Do not fund evil Nazis. Story 68. I have not purchased anything from Walgreens since they stopped carrying Plan B on their shelves. Neither have my husband and daughter. Story 69. Uline and Hobby Lobby are major Trump donors who support Make America Great Again and are generally right-wing Christofascists. Chick-fil-A is anti-gay. Seeing other responses, I will have to rethink Amazon, Audible, and Nestle. It will be hard to live without my Audible books. Story 70. Years ago, I spent 1 hour a day reading my Twitter timeline. I have not checked it in 2 months and I am not missing it. The platform is boring and full of cryptocurrency scams and bots. With Elmo added to this, I cannot in good conscience continue to use it. I do not know whether I will delete my account or just leave it, but I will not be active on it anymore. Story 71. I will not use a Tesla charger under any circumstances. I will not use Twitter. Uline is a pro-Trump packing materials company. Wells Fargo is a criminal organization. The New York Times are boosters of the Iraq War and nothing more than an email security trade journal. Mercedes, Audi, Bayerische Motorenwerke, Porsche, and Volkswagen use slave labor under the Third Reich. There are many automotive choices, so I buy other brands. Story 72. I do not buy meat or dairy. Modern factory farming is evil. Story 73. I blame ExxonMobil for the Exxon Valdez oil spill. I have never gotten over it or their horrible behavior afterward. I will never buy any goods or services associated with Elon Musk, whom I consider a Nazi. I will not buy Tesla products or use Twitter. I do not use Facebook, Instagram, or Apple products. I use Android. I avoid Barilla because of their owner's anti-gay messaging. I also avoid Chick-fil-A for the same reason. Story 74. I have never and will never eat at Chick-fil-A. I do not care if someone else pays for it. I am not contributing to bigotry. I will not support Hobby Lobby. Fuck them. Story 75. And guess what? None of these companies even care. This is just a comment on the futility of it. All you get is a feeling of doing the right thing for yourself. Hopefully it is worth something. Story 76. T2 markets itself as an independent tea franchise. It has been owned by Unilever for years. Story 77. I am sleep deprived and on a long car ride, but here are a few major examples. One of the worst corporations, in my opinion, is Nestle. I believe water is a human right and Nestle does not. They were accused of contributing to infant deaths in Africa related to infant formula marketing, which led to the 1977 Nestle boycott. Walmart destroys local businesses in rural areas and concentrates wealth. It does not pay or treat employees well. McDonald's does not pay its workers well, and its food drop for the Israeli army is something I will not forget. I have also been turned off for years after a friend described sanitary issues when they worked there. I have pulled back from Amazon because of union busting, poor worker treatment, and unsustainable business practices. Target positioned itself as a progressive company but then backtracked under the current administration. A company I now think less of is Publix. It stood by its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Story 78. I quit all Blizzard games after finding out about the misogyny and the horrible working conditions. It is a shame because I was initially enjoying Overwatch, Hearthstone, and Diablo, and I would occasionally return to World of Warcraft every couple of expansions. I check periodically to see if they have corrected the issues, but it seems they have just continued. I doubt they miss my money. Story 79. Anything owned by the Weston family, Rogers Communications, Activision Blizzard, or Sony. Story 80. Loblaw Canada. A friend worked for them, so I had an inside view of what was going on. It was unethical, and they do not care about customers or employees. Story 81. Vodafone, Altus, and NOS, the internet service providers in Portugal. Any brand that has a betting website as a sponsor on merchandise. Any product that shows clear indications of being dropshipped and rebranded. Peugeot, Renault, Mercedes, and Audi vehicles manufactured in the last 5 to 7 years. Bon Bulab 3D Printer. Sony's PlayStation Store. Forza Games by Turn 10 Studios. Anything from Ubisoft. Story 82. Burger King plays an awful song. Yes, I consider that unethical. It causes human suffering. Story 83. I do not shop at Walmart because they treat their employees poorly. Story 84. Qantas is doing everything it can to make Australia a worse place and to line its corporate pockets at the expense of the community. Story 85. Amazon engages in anti-competitive business practices, has poor workforce practices, and abuses its power. Story 86. I was treated unfairly a few times by Amazon, so I no longer buy from them. I used to feel guilty about using them every time I read about how their workers are treated, but they were so convenient until they were not. I do not use Google because they are dishonest about their "don't be evil" motto. They collect user data and profit from it, and then they shut down the applications people were using without warning. I am not sure how you build a business on the Google platform when they could remove the services you depend on at any moment. There are others, but those are the main two. Also, platforms such as Wish and Temu use forced labor to sell low-quality and sometimes dangerous knockoffs. This is wrong, and they are severely damaging the environment for minimal profit. Story 87. Nestle, Coca-Cola, and, in Germany, Müller, Landlieb, and other Müller brands. Story 88. I played Blizzard and Electronic Arts games for a long time, but I have moved away from almost all AAA games these days. Story 89. I know this might sound a bit generic and white left-wing, but Nestle is a dodgy company. We have a shop nearby that sells heavily discounted Nestle products, and I avoid those products. Story 90. Nissan welcomed a foreigner who helped save the company from collapse. They then threw him under the bus while doing nothing about the Japanese executives who had broken the law. Story 91. Any company still doing business with Russia is problematic for obvious reasons. Story 92. I try to avoid Nestle. I think they removed their logo from many products after widespread criticism of some of their practices, and I cannot keep track of all their subsidiaries. I also avoid local businesses that appear to be involved in organized crime or money laundering. We have several of these in my area and they are easily identified. They are run by members of the same extended family. They accept only cash, and they have many luxury cars parked in front but few or no customers visible. I canceled my Amazon Prime subscription about 15 years after I first signed up and ended it about a year ago. I now try to order as much as possible from other sellers. Sometimes items are a little more expensive, which I accept. Often the best price is not on Amazon, but occasionally there is no alternative. Overall, we have been ordering much less since we canceled Prime, which I find refreshing. Story 93. I cannot name the company because the owner keeps changing the name. She runs a company that puts Braille on business cards. I decided to look elsewhere after finding her social media, which was full of racist and anti-Asian rants. I am an Asian Canadian, so this was concerning. Not putting Braille on our business cards was not an option, since we are an accessibility consulting company. I was concerned that someone with those racist views could intentionally alter the Braille on our business cards because of my surname. I know it would be unprofessional, but there was a chance. Since I am not blind or fluent in Braille, there would be no way of knowing until it was too late. I chose another company in Ottawa instead. The cost was higher due to shipping. Story 94, Mercedes-Benz, Bayerische Motorenwerke, Volkswagen. I will never buy a car from a company that used slave labor during the Holocaust. Story 95. I will never buy anything from British Petroleum. After reading about their role in the Deepwater Horizon disaster and watching the movie, they can get fucked. Story 96. I'll always take the extra time to avoid Amazon, but it's not always possible when the brand I want to buy from has moved its entire online storefront to Amazon. There is no ethical consumption hits hard these days. Story 97. I stopped supporting Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. I gave up Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering, even though I had played both for over 20 years, because I refused to support the company's abuse of artists and customers. Story 98. I often choose to buy from local businesses that treat their employees fairly. For example, there is a convenient supermarket, but they require employees to work 6 days a week and pay only the minimum wage for a full-time job. They also interfere with holidays and other working conditions, so I do not shop there. The supermarket owners also own several buildings in town that they converted to short-term rentals, which makes it unaffordable for people like their workers to rent in the area. I refuse to support them. Story 99. I do not buy products that pay the Kardashians for advertising. Story 100. Apple has treated requests for comments as toilet paper for decades and routinely engages in malicious practices, such as installing an inline chip to prevent people from using standard third-party universal serial bus cables. Story 101. I only buy essentials and try to choose the most ethical options. I never shop at Walmart and generally dislike shopping. Story 102. I do not buy Bondwell after they provided the Russian army with care packages and wished them a swift victory last winter. Slava Ukraini. Story 103. Nestle, Starbucks, Disney, Walmart, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, Hobby Lobby, Home Depot. Story 104. Girl Scout cookies and school fundraisers. More than once I was berated in front of my class or team by my teachers and coaches for not selling enough. I explained that I did not have any family in state, and they told us we were not allowed to sell door to door. In high school, my mom nearly sucker punched my soccer coach after he told her that I was not pulling my weight and that he was disappointed in me for not showing up to the mandatory 3-day fundraising event that was supposed to pay for our warm-ups and uniforms. Of course, I did not want to go, but I missed it because I was at my grandma's funeral. I told my coach a few days prior that I was not going to make it and that I would just pay $80 for my stuff. Long story short, you have your whole life to work. I believe that kids should be riding bikes, climbing trees, playing with Barbies, jumping on trampolines, and not being forced to do socially acceptable child labor. I think it is so ludicrous and I do not know why everyone is okay with it. Story 105. I struggle with Dunkin' Donuts only because the coffee is not my favorite. I don't think I have any other motives. Story 106. Some companies are hard to avoid because they own many subsidiaries, such as Nestle. Others I would like to boycott, but I have no reason to buy from them in the first place, such as the Coke family. A company I used to buy from but now avoid is the Danish footwear company ECCO. The fact that they are still doing business in Russia means they will be on my blacklist. Story 107. Corporations exist to reap benefits while removing themselves from liability and responsibility for negative outcomes. They are legally independent entities but are operated by human directors on a board. They are systemically parasitic and operate without regard for anyone or anything in their way. Simply put, they are generally harmful. Story 108. Nike kept Jason Kidd in ads after he beat his wife. I haven't bought their products since. Story 109. Toyota is more invested in denying election results than any other company. Studies suggested a possible correlation between alcohol-based mouthwash and cancer. Johnson & Johnson blocked a test designed to investigate this and chose not to make changes that might reduce the risk. Story 110. I think the question at this point, as we hear the death knell of late-stage capitalism, is really which big corporations are ethical or good. I cannot really think of any. Story 111. I avoid British petroleum gas stations like the plague. The bullshit they got away with in deep water is just ridiculous. Story 112. I have been pro-Tibet since I was 12. I was a big Beastie Boys fan when I was young. British Petroleum's partnership with PetroChina to drill for oil in the region not only helped fund China's rise despite human rights abuses, but also helped keep Tibet firmly under Chinese control. Story 113. I have a long list of companies to which I will not give money. Some for ethical reasons, some because I believe they have wronged me. Macy's. I do not even remember why I decided never to go back. Something like 30 years ago. ExxonMobil. I will never support them because of what their ship captain did. Chick-fil-A. I have never eaten there and never will. Hobby Lobby. They should be shut down. Home Depot. They used to receive a lot of my money, but not for the past 5 years or more. It goes on. Story 114. At this moment, I will not buy anything made in the United States except necessities for which there is no alternative because the sovereignty of my country matters. Story 115. If Americans could learn to operate a republic again and make bribery and campaign finance illegal, as reformers did early in the 20th century, they could have a government that is not run exclusively by the wealthiest lobbies. Do not hold your breath. Americans complain about corporate control on Facebook, but rarely to their congressional staff. Many Republican voters want more bribery and corporate influence over their representatives, and most do not know or care that appointed judges have destroyed much of their influence in United States politics. Democratic voters rarely act together and seldom make useful reforms a priority. The country is no longer capable of sustaining a republic and may never be again. Story 116. I will not buy Heinz ketchup because of what the company did to Leamington, Ontario. I have preferred French's since 2014. Story 117. I had to stop at a British petroleum gas station for the first time since the spill in the Gulf of Mexico about 3 months ago. I am still upset that it broke my streak. Story 118. Nestle. Multiple offenses. Anything to do with SeaWorld. If Blackfish had never happened and they were given half a chance, they would have orcas back in captivity for shows. Story 119. I avoid any business owned by shareholders or investment firms whenever possible. The simplest way to rein in corporations is to support and grow small businesses, but most Americans prioritize convenience and instant gratification above all else. Story 120. I do not buy from Subway because the company has been associated with individuals accused or convicted of sexual offenses on 2 occasions, including Jared Fogle. Story 121. As a Canadian, anything to do with America is complicated. It is not easy because we import essentially everything. Story 122. It is fairly niche, but I avoid buying gasoline from the Hungarian oil and gas company stations in Europe because I do not want to support the Hungarian government. Story 123. Google and Facebook. I will always call Fox Company by its old name. Story 124. I try to avoid Amazon, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Starbucks, Puma, Nike, and a few others. But it can be very hard to eliminate them entirely. It is worth being mindful of where you spend your money, though. Story 125. Asda. Getting involved in politics is not a good move. Amazon fucking Bezos. Facebook. Closed my account when they wanted to own my photos. Marks and Spencer. Getting involved in politics. Disney. Too woke to live. Carling Lager. Probably the weakest lager in the world. Nestle. Because they are cunts. Story 126. I do not shop at Walmart because of what they have done to small businesses and to American industry by importing cheap Chinese goods en masse. I appreciate, though, that many rural people do not have a choice. Story 127. Eggland's best because of this. Story 128. Hobby Lobby cannot have my money because of its religious policies. I also will not support Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. If you do not play role-playing games, it is hard to explain. If you do, you already know why. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.